Of course, let's go back to our top stories. One of our top stories for today, S&P, well, it was reported by Bloomberg that S&P Dow indices might remove Nigeria from that indices. So we're talking about Nigeria stock market from the S&P Frontier Index series and placing the country on its own due to transactions and repatriation of returns challenges occasioned by recent scarcity of forex in the Nigerian economy. Channel's business editor, Bosun Omofai, joins me now to take a look at this. Good morning to you, Bosun. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Harriet.
So this news, well, I can assure you that it's not something that we really want to hear at this time, especially since we know that managers of the economy are trying very hard to allay the fears of investors and make them realize that, look, things are getting better.
Well, I think this is news that we don't want to hear, but that's the news that we should expect to hear. Because when you have foreign exchange scarcity and rationing in a particular economy, then you're looking at intended and unintended consequences, and you can begin to broaden how much impact it will have on various aspects of our financial markets and national life. So this is just one of it, and it's not surprising really that when you are included in a basket of indices, and one of the reasons why you were included was a matter of liquidity, ease of transaction, and the ability to repatriate. This hasn't really been out from S&P, but Bloomberg reports early today that this may come. So Nigeria may be removed, placed on its own from basically three main indices, from which has Nigeria in that. You have the S&P All Africa Index. You have the S&P All Africa excluding South Africa. Then you have the S&P Africa Frontier Broader Market Index. So these are the three indices that Nigeria included.
So what's the implication of removing Nigeria?
Well, the implication of removing Nigeria and putting it on its own is that we are currently in a company of about 12 to 13 African countries, which includes Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ghana, the rest, Kenya, and the rest of them, Morocco, Egypt. What that means is that until these issues are resolved from the FX point of view, you can buy into Nigeria, but will not be tracked alongside these other 12 and 13 emerging countries. If you take all Africa, for example, which includes South Africa, which is the biggest boy, the big elephant in the room. That means that you can still trade in Nigeria, you can and do all you have, but the S&P look at the methodology and the parameters of including you as part of this basket of indices and say, hey, things are a little bit tough in your environment, then therefore we need to take you and put you aside as a standalone. Nigeria is not a market to be ignored. Don't forget that. In terms of index return, we still give. Our stocks are still believed to be seriously undervalued. But if you look at the pressure that has come under, the banks have come under in the last period, you've seen the pressure from other sectors of the economy. You look at the FX pressure in which the financial regulator began to ration FX for travel allowances, to BDCs, to for medicals and school fees, and to manufacturers for those who want to do raw material import and equipment import as well. These are some of the fallouts of that.
But then you would expect that at least they would wait for the whatever it is to crystallize, you know, even though it's a rationing and there's a little bit of a scarcity, but there's an intervention and there's commitment to show that, look, we're willing to push it this far. We're hoping that it will get to an equilibrium for all parties concerned. So why don't they just give it a chance to see how much of an effect this will have on the markets generally?
Well, I think the central bank should sit down with the stock exchange, or the stock exchange should sit with the central bank very quickly, perhaps with the SEC, to quickly look at what could be done. If you look at, now this is one thing that brings to the fore the exposure of our Nigerian stock market to foreign portfolio investors. They own a very good chunk of our markets, and most of the big companies that you talk about every day here are owned in the main by size, Nigerian bureaus, Guinness, Total, Mobil, and the rest of them. So if you look at the most capitalized companies, with the exception of Dangote Cement, for example, Lafarge, Africa, and the rest, they're all owned by foreign portfolio investors and parent companies in Switzerland, in UK, elsewhere. So
Germany.
In Germany and what have you. So this exercise that once you trade these shares in volume, and these are big guys who hold blocks of shares and what have you. So when they pay dividend and they want to repatriate the dividend in dollar terms, then they have a bit of a long queue of how to get these dollars out. They need this money very quickly. Don't forget the European market. and economies are also under some pressure. So they need to claw back overseas money where they have their investment, and they don't want to keep holding, because for each day it's difficult for them to get their returns back home. There is what you call the time value of money. So a dollar today is not in the morning is not the same dollar in the afternoon, nor in the evening. So to that extent, they want their money where's one when due. They don't get it in naira, but how soon would they be able to convert that quickly and move out of the country and put this money elsewhere, or put it back in some other sectors of the economy? They need to have that ease of foreign exchange, and I think this is one exposure to that. We've had our market in the hands of foreign investors, such that when we run into liquidity scarcity from the FX point of view, we're suffering it on the other side, because we've depended so much on foreign portfolio investors in our market. And perhaps this is a wake-up call to the Nigerian Stock Exchange and everyone, is that we need to grow more of a local investment community, local investors, to do more in the market, because they're taking their returns in naira and not in dollars.
But then the Nigerian Stock Exchange has tried to do that, but maybe at this time he needs to ramp it up more.
We need to do. If you look at some of the new listings that the stock exchange would want, or they've talked about in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they will still put some of the large component of this in the hands of foreign investors. If you list Shell Petroleum, for example, you can be sure that the majority of those shares would not be in the hands of Nigerians. It's going to be in the hands of folks sitting in London and Luxembourg and whatever, Brussels. That's where it's going to be, in the United States. So we need to think very deeply about listing the telecoms, big telecom giants as well. You list MTN today, you can be sure where the majority of the shares will be. So this is some of the things that we need to go back home, look at how to solve this immediate problem or emerging problem, but look at the longer term consequences of building a market solely around foreign portfolio investors. We saw what they did in 2008 to our market when they fled the banking system and the stock market. We knew what happened. Now again, we're falling into the same trapdoor, and I think we just need to get back on the table and say, look, how do we solve this problem? We need foreign investors, and every market needs it. The Saudi Arabians need the foreign investors. Everybody's opening up his market. But again, you need to have a very strong balance in which you don't allow this dominance of foreign portfolio investors, that such time that when they shut the door on you, you're left gasping for breath, like a fish out of water.
Well, Wilson, let's anchor that conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the program, and of course doing a cut and razor for us, because we're hoping to get the Nigerian Stock Exchange to respond to this issue as well.
I agree.
Well, Business Morning continues after now. Stay with us.